So, what was it like during the Great Dust Bowl for your parents?
They said it was very scary because when you drove, there was stuff blowing around in the air, and you had to stop and brush it off your car. And it was hot because there was no such thing as air conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And they were frightened a lot, but they drove across the whole United States from New Jersey to Texas. And very few people did that in 1936.
Okay. Did they say like it was worth it, or did they just come back home exhausted like?
Well, I really don't know. I think my mother enjoyed it a lot because she had never been out of New Jersey until that time when she got married. And my father had been all over the world, so I don't think he was as impressed with seeing different states. But my mother lived in a northeast climate, which was 4 seasons. There was winter, spring, summer, and fall. And when she went through the United States, she went through different periods of temperature changes. And when she got to Texas, and it was so hot, and there was no such thing as air conditioning in those days, she was like, how could people live here? But people from Texas, if they had come to drive to New Jersey, would say, how can anybody live here when there's snow and ice and it's 10 below zero? So I guess she learned that the whole United States was different. There was different climates everywhere. I remember her saying that. And some places had mountains, some places were very flat, some places were farmland, some places were forests. There wasn't nearly the growth and the homes and the businesses that exist today.
Mm-hmm.
They were just starting to start so many industries that we take for granted today.
Okay. So, if you could have explained anything to anyone at that time, right? And then you would just be like teleported back to modern day, who would you explain the stuff to, and what would you be explaining? Sorry if I phrased that weird.
I don't understand that question.
I mean, if you could go and like if you could tell your great grandparent how
the world is today,
mm-hmm.
what would I tell them?
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's really different from when you were alive.
Would you talk about cell phones? Would you talk about?
I would talk about many things. I mean, since 1937, when I was born, there have been nobody I ever knew rode an airplane in 1937.
Mm-hmm.
Airplanes were...
It was just the Wright brothers.
Well, the Wright brothers did. And yes, people flew in airplanes, but they were small airplanes with 2 people or maybe 4 people could ride in. And an average person wouldn't ride in an airplane. They wouldn't have the money to do it. Maybe if you were in industry or something that required you to travel, you would do so in an airplane. But the average family did not fly. That was most unusual. And I went from, when I was a child, we didn't have a refrigerator. We had what they called an ice box. And once a week, the iceman would come with a big chunk of ice, and it was in forceps, and he would put it in the top of that freezer. That would keep some things cold, but if you know a piece of ice, after a certain time it starts to melt.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time the Iceman came again, the ice would be all gone. So we went to shop every day for groceries because otherwise they'd be bad. We wouldn't want to put a piece of meat out on in a warm room because it wouldn't be fit to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And then things, we had radio. That was our entertainment.
Oh, I still have a radio.
I still have a radio too, and I still enjoy
Me too.
a radio.
Mhm.
I like to listen to music on the radio, and I like sometimes to listen to what some of the shows that are on there.
Yeah.
I find television shows us everything, but radio made us imagine things. When we used to listen to Superman or the Lone Ranger or something, we would sit there and try to wonder what they looked like. And when they said Superman could fly and the Lone Ranger could ride his horse, we could picture that in our heads. And I sometimes think that was better because it made us think. I think now some of the inventions that we have don't make us think so much anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Like a lot of social media, I feel like it probably made us not need to think as hard. Now, granted, it doesn't apply for everyone, but at the same time, like I've had classmates, I've had friends that like before social medias like TikTok or whatever, it's like they wouldn't scroll on their phones, they trying to entertain themselves in other ways, like in Rubik's Cubes, trying to figure out how to solve that or solving other puzzles, or learning math or whatever.
Do you know what I played with toys? I say later, after I was getting older, we started having mechanical toys and toys that you could push or that you could work. But when I grew up, I played with jigsaw puzzles and learned how to fit things into a thing. That could keep me occupied for hours because it took a long time to do it. You had to think about how each piece would fit in there, and there were puzzles that had 50 pieces, and there were puzzles that had 1,000 pieces. And you could work on them for weeks. But that's what we did for entertainment. We took a bicycle ride, we roller skated, we played outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
We never thought of a cell phone. I mean, we used to have a phone that we shared with our neighbors. We didn't have one phone for one family. You would pick up the phone, and if your neighbor was on the phone talking to somebody, you'd say, "Sorry, I'll try again later when the line is free." Mm-hmm. And before that, you had telephone operators that you had to call them, and they called the number for you that you were trying to reach. So if you were living in Texas now, and I was living in New Jersey, for instance, I would write you a letter. Because to make a phone call to you was very costly. So I didn't do it. And I'd have to write the letter.
Then you
put it in the mail, post it, and it might get to you in 3 days if it went with airmail, or if it went by train, it could take a week, or a bus, or a truck, or something. So if I wanted to say something to you today, your dad was showing me how to say, I could talk to him today. I could say, why don't you go to the store and buy hamburger meat?
Mm-hmm.
But if it was before, I would have to call somebody. I would have to write somebody a letter and say, yesterday my sister had a baby. So they wouldn't find out that she had a baby until a week later. So things move slower. Everything is very fast today.
Mhm.
So people my age, not all of them, some people have embraced technology and jumped on it and love it. I don't happen to be one of those people, but I'm trying to do a little bit of it. So I think I do appreciate how fast we can get information.
Mhm.
If I were making a trip years ago, I went to the American Automobile Association and they got out maps and put them all together and said it would take you 2 hours to drive from this city to that city and another hour and a half to get to the next big city and then 3 hours, and in that day you could know how many miles you would travel. But that took a long time to put it together. But now you can go on your GPS and say I'm going here to here, and within a matter of minutes, you know how long it's going to take you, good places for you to stop to stay the night, good places to eat along the way. It's just, it makes life very simple, but you have to learn how to to use that technology.
Mhm.
I'm inclined sometimes to use the little technology I know and rely on the old-fashioned ways that I did things.
Okay.
I think you should sit here where you can see you on this too.
Eh, I think I'll just end it.